Before the world became a relentless rush of notifications and cold glass screens, there was a different kind of morning. It began not with a digital chime, but with the soft, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock and the scent of yeast rising in the quiet warmth of a kitchen. In 1959, a neighborhood wasn't just a collection of addresses. It was a living, breathing organism, held together by invisible threads of care. We often look back at those years and see black and white photos, but for those who lived it, the colors were more vibrant than anything we see today. It was the gold of the butter, the deep blue of a freshly pressed apron, and the silver light of a 5 a.m. sun filtering through lace curtains. Today we step back into that sacred silence, into the kitchen of a woman who understood that a simple apple pie was never just about the fruit. It was an anchor for a community that refused to let anyone drift away. Meet Margaret. It is 6:15 a.m. on a Saturday in October 1959. The linoleum floor is cool beneath her feet, and the house smells of cinnamon and floor wax. Margaret doesn't just bake, she orchestrates. This morning, her kitchen is a sanctuary of purpose. As she slides her third lattice-top pie into the oven, the heavy iron door clicks. With a sound of absolute permanence, she adjusts her apron, the one with the hand-embroidered daisies, and pauses to listen. The world outside is waking up. She hears the muffled thwack of the morning paper hitting the porch and the distant whistle of a neighbor's tea kettle. For Margaret, this bake sale isn't a chore, it's a mission. Her husband, Arthur, will be up soon to help with the heavy lifting. But for now, this moment belongs to the women. These recipes weren't found on a website. They were whispered over backyard fences and scribbled on the backs of envelopes, passed down like crown jewels. Every pinch of salt was a legacy. By 10 a.m., the lawn of the Grace Community Church has been transformed. This was the headquarters of the neighborhood's social architects. Observe the arrival of the cars, the heavy chrome bumpers reflecting the autumn sun. Out come the card tables, unfolding with a familiar metallic clack, clack. Here comes Dorothy with her famous lemon squares, and Betty, clutching a tin of snickerdoodles, as if it held the secrets to the universe. These women were the glue. While the world talked of the space race and the Cold War, these ladies were winning the war against loneliness. As they smoothed out the checkered cloths, they exchanged more than just baked goods. They exchanged news of Mrs. Gable's hip surgery, of the young Smith boy who just joined the Marines, and the secret to getting grass stains out of trousers. It was a symphony of mutual support, conducted in the key of kindness. And then there were the men. Arthur and the other husbands didn't just stand by. They were the silent scaffolding of the event. You could hear the low rumble of their voices as they hauled the heavy wooden benches from the school basement. They wore their Saturday flannels and smoked pipes that smelled of cherry tobacco, their hands calloused and strong. There was no hiring a crew or outsourcing. If a table wobbled, Arthur had a shim in his pocket. If the sun got too hot, Mr. Henderson was there, with the canvas awning. In 1959, neighbor was a verb. It was something you did. You showed up. You carried the weight so your neighbor didn't have to. There was a profound, unspoken security in knowing that if your roof leaked or your spirit wavered, there were 10 men within a block's radius who would be there before the sun went down. Watch the exchange at the table. A young boy reaches up, his fingers stained with dirt from the creek, clutching 2 warm quarters. Margaret smiles, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and hands him a slice of heaven wrapped in wax paper. That 50 cents wasn't profit. It was a brick for the new library wing. It was a swing set for the park where children could play until the streetlights came on. Every transaction was a vote of confidence in their shared future. There was no me in that economy, only us. The clink of those coins in the tin box was the heartbeat of the town. They weren't just buying sugar and flour. They were investing in the soul of their community. ensuring that the world their children inherited was a little kinder, a little sweeter, and a lot more connected than the one they found. If we look at our world today, we see a miracle of efficiency. We can order a gourmet cake with a thumbprint and have it delivered by a stranger who never looks us in the eye. We live in high-rise buildings with hundreds of neighbors, yet we walk through the hallways in a curated silence, eyes fixed on our glowing screens. We have followers instead of friends, and connections instead of neighbors. The bake sale has been replaced by the automated checkout. But as we sit in our climate-controlled rooms, surrounded by every convenience imaginable, don't we feel a certain chill? Don't we miss the scent of Margaret's kitchen? We have traded the messy, beautiful, tactile reality of community for the cold, frictionless ease of isolation. We save time, yes, but we lost the warmth that makes time worth having. But the vault is never truly closed as long as we remember. Margaret's apron may be folded away in a cedar chest, and the sound of those quarters may have faded, but the spirit of the neighborhood lives within you, the curators of these stories. You remember the taste of that community. You remember the names of the families who lived 3 houses down. We ask you today, what was the heart of your neighborhood? Was it a bake sale, a Sunday potluck, or a porch where the light was always on? Please, share your memories in the comments below. Your stories are the gold that fills this vault, and by sharing them, you keep that warmth alive for a world that desperately needs to remember how to be a neighbor again. Thank you for walking down this leaf-strewn path with us today.